Bretagard is a land of sprawling plains and lush forests. Its fauna and its flora is diverse, and the land is rich. So as the land are the people, and these people are led and kept safe by the Bretagard, lawmakers, clerics, and warriors, led by their fearless leader Maja. Maja and her Bretagard have always been strong enough to protect Bretagard. But 3 planeswalkers have appeared in Bretagard, and they bring untold horrors with them. This time, the Bretagard alone may not be enough. Maja has sent a handful of her most faithful warriors into the wilds to seek help not from the other clans, but from the land itself. Hello, Selesnya warriors, and welcome to the Uncommon Commander. Alright, hello again everybody, my name is Ryan and I will be your host. Today we're building around Maja, Bretagard Protector, who is a 2/3 legendary creature human warrior with the abilities other creatures you control get +1/+1, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 white human warrior creature token. Obviously this commander wants us to ramp to create tokens. She feels custom made to Helmet token deck using cards like Divine Visitation, Anointed Procession, and Parallel Lives. After all, why create 1 token when you can create 2? This was immediately so apparent to me that I apparently decided it wasn't for me. But I still had the thought, why create 1 creature when you can create 2? So, I've decided to go down the path less trodden. Less trodden because the trees will kill anyone who steps onto it. Today, we're ramping hard, creating warriors and then turning our lands into creatures. This deck is Maja Land Creatures. The treants rise to fight along their human protectors. Today's deck is built using a $100 budget instead of my usual $150. If you want to drop the budget even further, I recommend cutting some of the expensive cards in here and adding in more cheap ramp. Ramp really almost never hurts in this deck. Now, let's get into it. No matter what tactic we decided to build around for Maja, we have to ramp. She costs only 5 mana and synergizes immediately with it. It's just too good. So our pure ramp spells are going to be Diligent Farmhand, Veteran Explorer, Edge of Autumn, Colony Heart Expedition, Sakura Tribe Elder, Cultivate, Kadama's Reach, Nissa's Pilgrimage, Primal Growth, and Roiling Regrowth. Some people may object to including Veteran Explorer here due to its symmetrical effect, but we're probably the only ones getting 4 extra power added to our board because of its dying, so I decided to keep it in there. The rest are either very efficient or are here to get us more than 1 land out of our library. I did also include a 4 mana ramp spell that only searches for forests, so it's not really here to help ramp our commander out, but if it's kicked, it turns those forests into land creatures, and that's what we're all about here. That card's name is Hunting Wilds. We also have a few cards that allow us to get lands into our hand in Journey of Discovery, Yavimaya Elder, and Pale Recluse. Finally, there's no point finding extra lands to put into our hand if we can't put them onto the table as well. To this end, we have 4 cards that let us put down an extra land each turn. Those are Exploration, Azusa, Lost But Seeking, and Wayward Swordtooth. Azusa actually lets us put down 2 extra lands per turn. With all of these lands entering play, we're going to want to turn them into creatures. The bigger the better, and of course, the harder to kill the better. Cards that turn targeted lands into creatures are Waker of the Wilds, Awakening of Vitu-Ghazi, Nissa Who Shakes the World, and Wakeroot Elemental. Ones that turn all of our lands into creatures, either momentarily or permanently, are Sylvan Awakening, Kamal's Will, and Liege of the Tangle. One that does both targeted lands and all lands, depending on the ability being used, is Nissa World Waker. Of course, there is an obvious issue with making all of these lands into creatures. We need to tap them to cast spells, but we also need to have them untapped if we actually want to attack or block anything with them. To help solve this issue, we have these cards which bestow upon our creatures the wonderful ability of Vigilance. Brave the Sands, Sarah's Blessing, Always Watching, and Embodiment of Insight. Each of these also bestows a little something extra, except for Sarah's Blessing, which just gives Vigilance. Brave the Sands allows each of our creatures to block 2 extra creatures. Always Watching gives a +1/+1 anthem to our non-token creatures, and Embodiment of Insight has a landfall ability that turns a land into a 3/3 elemental creature with haste until the end of the turn. So now our lands are also creatures, and we can actually use them as both lands and creatures thanks to Vigilance. But there's still another problem with this strategy, and it may be that you've already realized it. Doing this makes our lands very susceptible to removal. To assist with this issue, we have a couple of protection spells. Those are Reknit, which regenerates any type of permanent, Sacred Ground, which will return our lands untapped to the battlefield if an opponent tries destroying them with spells or abilities, Akroma's Blessing for protection from a color, and Terra Eternal, which dispenses with all the fancy effects and just goes ahead and makes all lands indestructible. Okay, but someone cast Hour of Devastation or something, and a bunch of our lands are dead anyway. Now what? Easy there, Worrywart. We planned for this, remember? Oh, I guess you weren't really there during the planning phase, were you? No matter, I'll show you. This is our contingency. Planar Birth and the Mending of Dominaria will return lands from your graveyard to the battlefield en masse, while Groundskeeper will allow you to return a land to your hand with his activated ability. Ramunap Excavator will let you play lands that are already in your graveyard as though they were in your hand instead. There are only 4 of these, so use them wisely, but these in addition to the protection spells should be enough to make your land creatures fairly sturdy. There are also a few cards in here which synergize nicely with land creatures. Those are Sylvan Advocate and Earth Surge, which both give +2/+2 anthems to land creatures, and Knight of the Reliquary, which will help us fish lands out of our library while also filling our graveyard for land reanimation later. As a bonus, it also gets bigger by doing that job. Okay, now let's focus on refilling our hand. Green card draw often relies on having creatures on the table. The cards that we have in this deck that require at least some kind of board state are the Sacrifice Outlets, Culling Deus, Evolutionary Leap, and Skull Mulcher. The ones that require a board presence and aren't Sacrifice Outlets are Symbiotic Deployment and Camaraderie. With Symbiotic Deployment, you may also want to have some enchantment destruction ready to cast on it, just in case. Mentor of the Meek is a card that requires a board state, but in this case, that board state is really just our commander. As long as we have Maja out with Mentor of the Meek, our ramp cards turn into conditional card draw. Some cards that don't require any presence are Freyalise's Charm, which acts as a cheaper but very situational Mind Stone, Harmonize, and Nissa Vastwood Seer. Actually, Nissa Vastwood Seer doesn't give us any real card advantage as she just helps you search your library for a basic forest with her ETB. Her flip side, however, Nissa Sage Animist lets us, using her +1 ability, reveal the top card of our library and put it into our hand. If it's a land card, we instead put it into play. On the off chance you get to ult her, she can also turn some of our lands into creatures. Now, some people aren't going to like Symbiotic Deployment or Freyalise's Charm due to their obvious downsides. If you're one of those people, I recommend switching them with Abundance, which isn't card draw but is very useful card selection, and or Shamanic Revelation, which is another solid option but does require a rich board state and a hefty 5 mana investment to get good value out of it. Finally, we're going to need ways to remove opponents' threats. Since we're in green and white, we really can destroy pretty much anything, but I've focused on the removal of creatures, artifacts, and enchantments. For the targeted removal of artifacts and enchantments, we have Caustic Caterpillar, Nature's Chant, Sundering Growth, and Sylvan Reclamation. For creatures, we have Crib Swap and Sheer Drop, the latter of which has Awaken 3 to help with our land creature strategy. Finally, a card that can do spot removal of creatures or enchantments, or can alternatively give +1/+1 counters to each of our creatures, is Collective Effort. If we have a big enough board state, this thing can be a soft board wipe. Speaking of our board wipes, we're running ones that specifically do not remove lands. Those are Planar Outburst, which is another Awaken card, Urza's Ruinous Blast, and Hour of Revelation, which our warrior tokens can help cast. A little tragically ironic since it's going to kill them. Finally, we're on to our land cards. We have utility lands of Ghost Quarter and Tectonic Edge to help with our land removal deficiencies. We also have Ondu Inversion as our 4th Wrath effect, which can be put down as Ondu Sky Runes. Factoring in that we want lands to be creatures, we are also running Darksteel Citadel, which will be an indestructible creature if it gets turned into one, as well as Stirring Wildwood and Treetop Village, which can become creatures all on their own. For extra lands entering the battlefield, and therefore the creation of more warriors, we have Blighted Woodland, Myriad Landscape, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic Expanse. These can also color fix us. And for our basic lands, we're running 17 forests and 8 plains. Well, you've made it through 95 cards in this 100 card format. Now we're on to the final 5 cards of the deck tech, in a segment that I unoriginally call
The Final Countdown!
In a deck where warriors and trees combine to smite our enemies like some kind of a scene out of Lord of the Rings The Two Towers, what kind of fun could we have coming up? Well, let's find out together. Our number 5 card, Court of Bounty, fits the role of getting us an extra land per turn. This one makes it into the final countdown segment though, while the others don't, for 3 reasons. A. It costs $2 to buy, while the next cheapest, Azusa Lost But Seeking, costs $7. 2. It gives us card advantage if we can hold on to the Monarchy. We're going to have a lot of chump blockers, so that's not usually too big of an ask against most decks. And D. It'll let us cheat creatures into play if we can successfully do number 2. Our number 4 card on this list is another dual-colored card, this time a Planeswalker. It's Huatli, Radiant Champion. She's here in a bid to get her emblem on the board, which will turn all of our ramp spells into card draw, as long as Maja is also on the board. Thanks to Maja and our deck being built around our lands turning into creatures, our deck is pretty good at getting a fair amount of creatures into play. With Huatli, you're either going to be ulting her the second turn that she's out, or she'll be dead. What I'm saying is, cast her when you've got a decent board state, but not before. 5 mana is a lot to pay for protection, but at number 3, Join Shields is a card we're okay with paying that price for. The reason? Because it untaps all of our creatures, which means that it also untaps all of our lands, as long as they're already creatures. We can use it for protection, we can use it as a combat trick if we're getting attacked, or we can use it as ramp. If we've got instants in our hands to cast after it, we can actually use it as all 3 at once. The problem with most ramp spells is that they put your lands into play tapped. Well, no longer. At number 2, we have a turn 1 play called Amulet of Vigor, and it's going to make our permanents enter the battlefield untapped if they would enter tapped. This speeds up our deck considerably at a low price of entry. Well, low price in terms of mana cost. It actually costs like $13. But Amulet of Vigor isn't really here to speed our deck up. That's more of a side effect. You see, the real reason Amulet of Vigor is here is to combo with our number 1 card in the deck. First, cast Maja and put a land in play. Then cast Amulet of Vigor. Then cast our number 1 card, Perilous Forays. If it isn't already obvious, I'll explain. We're going to tap a land, sacrifice a warrior, and put a basic land into play untapped thanks to Amulet of Vigor. This will create another warrior. And then we'll tap that land and sacrifice the new warrior and search for another land. And we'll do that over and over again until we don't have any more basic lands in our deck. They'll all be on the table. Now just cast Sylvan Awakening, and congratulations, you've just won the game! Before going today, I wanted to mention a few cards that I had to cut from the deck that would make great upgrades if you want to increase the budget a bit. Adding them all in would increase it to the tune of about $180 to $200 for all 100 cards, depending on which cards you want to cut to make room for these. These cards that I reluctantly cut to get this thing down to a $100 budget are Splendid Reclamation, Vivian Reed, Life from the Loam, Scapeshift, and Martyr's Cry. Each of those stands a good chance of making this deck significantly more competitive, but at a somewhat substantial increase in budget. Okay, I've held off until this very last second to remind you to hit the like and subscribe buttons so as not to be any more annoying than I already am. Doing that really helps this channel grow, and I do love me some wild growth. Also, please feel free to leave a comment to this video. I read all of them and will respond when able. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this type of deck, and I'd also want to know if you enjoy the $100 budget instead of the $150 budget that I usually do. I feel like a smaller budget can help put these things into more people's hands, and that's really something that I think is a good thing. But there are some downsides that come with it, like deck power. Let me know what you prefer. Anyway, that's all for today, so I'm going to go for a hike, and I hope those snowy woods don't come to life. I'll see you next time, folk.